Welcome to State Scoop TV. I'm Jake Williams. We're here at the NASCIO Midyear Conference in Crystal City, Virginia, and my guest today is Zulfikar Ramzan, the CTO of RSA. Zuli, thanks for being with us, man.
My pleasure, thank you.
So, Zuli, we talked a little bit earlier today about risk and about visibility across the enterprise. From your position in RSA, how should states and state and local governments be viewing visibility, and what are some of the priorities that they should have in that space?
So first of all, from a security perspective, I think visibility is the number one priority because ultimately you cannot protect what you cannot see.
Right.
And that's the key to security nowadays at a fundamental level. But more specifically, when you look at visibility, it's not just about being able to see what's happening. There are two key elements. Number one, you have to be able to see what's happening in close to real time. Because attackers move very swiftly, they're after your critical assets. If you can't figure out what they're doing quickly enough, there's a good chance they're going to get to those crown jewels.
Right.
The second element is being able to look retroactively as well. Oftentimes when an attack does take place, you might see a single artifact, and the goal should be able to trace that artifact back to its root cause and understand the full scope, the ramifications of that attack. So for me, visibility is really about depth and breadth, but also about being able to look back in time and do things also at a real-time fashion as well.
And what are the challenges that some of the state and local governments that you work with every day at RSA, and even folks across all sectors, what are some of the challenges that they're seeing when it comes to protecting that enterprise that we're talking about, and how are you working with them to overcome those challenges?
Right, so I think the good and bad part about the visibility we just talked about is that visibility gives you insight, but it can almost tell you too much.
Right.
And it's really critical to be able to filter down to understand the most critical elements to your organization. What I think of as mission-driven security. What is your organization trying to achieve at a more fundamental level, security aside? And then to what extent are your security programs helping them to achieve that mission? For example, let's say that you see that a particular system was compromised. The next question is, what was on that system? Was it something critical? Was it a system that only contained the PDF of the lunch menu? And it turns out that if you can't tell the difference, you won't know which incidents matter most to your organization. So we work with large organizations where they've taken thousands of incidents that they were getting per day and whittled that down to about 12 or 15 that really matter to their organization. Now you can't look at 1,000 things a day, that's just too much from a staffing level, but you can look at a dozen things carefully. That's very, very feasible. So I think juxtaposing that visibility with the right level of contextual information that's mission driven is really the winning strategy for most organizations today.
And let's talk specifically about the enterprise. We're here at NASCIO, so we're talking about state governments. As much as they would be willing to admit, how do you think that they're trying to gain more visibility across their networks and their enterprises, and what roadblocks are kind of in the way for them to do that?
Right, so we work certainly with a lot of counties, state and local. I think one of the biggest challenges is that the environment is so heterogeneous.
Yeah.
It's often difficult to get a single point of contact that you can manage. So I think when you have that situation, you've got to look at both the network and the endpoint as two combined elements, part of the same puzzle. If you have network level visibility, you can get everybody when they're on the network, but sometimes that's not enough. You may have somebody going off network doing something or a very distributed system, in which case having endpoint visibility to augment that is the critical element. I think from my perspective, the real challenge is that when you talk to our customers, it's really about being able to take that mindset up front and convince their management, their senior layers, that visibility is the right foundational element for security, and implementing a visibility strategy from the get-go versus trying to do it after the fact when a major breach has happened.
So, we talked about a little bit about technologies there in that last answer, but what strategies and technologies, do you see on the horizon, so coming forward, that could really give state and local governments that visibility that we're talking about and improve security across the entire enterprise?
Right, so RSA is certainly a big proponent of this area through our NetWitness suite. We're able to enable our customers to understand what's happening at their network, at their endpoints, also to some degree cloud. They can look at logs and flow, all the critical elements you could imagine. That to me is the beginning step of it. Where I see the future is an analytics built on top of that visibility. So being able to glean meaningful insights from the data you collect. The difference between what I think of as information and knowledge. You have all the information out there, but can you extract the most meaningful knowledge out of it and then tie that knowledge to actual context to figure out what matters most? And from my perspective, it's something we're working on very actively, applying techniques like machine learning and artificial intelligence. Obviously two major buzzwords, things that we've been actually doing for about a decade and a half, but suddenly they become cool, and so we're talking about them in more detail. But I think that's the key for our customers, and I talk to them over and over again, that is part of their success strategy.
And so last question here, again, we're at NASCIO, we're talking to state folks. What's the one thing that these guys should be considering for their enterprise cybersecurity strategy going forward?
So I think, to me, actually, there's almost three things together, so I'm going to cheat a bit and not say one. So number one, think about risk at a high level, because ultimately everything you do in security boils down to a question of risk, and risk has to be tied into your overall organizational framework. To understand risk, to know what's happening in your environment, you have to be able to assess the situation. You can only assess what you can see. Right. So visibility then becomes a foundation for being able to answer important questions about risk. And finally, the most important thing to have visibility into, beyond just the network and the endpoint, is ultimately the human identity at the end of the day. Because every attack at some point involves somebody co-opting or compromising an identity in a way that was not expected.
Sure.
So really those three elements, identity, visibility, and risk, tend to be the three key elements for every organization to take a holistic, mission-driven view of security.
Zully, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So for more about what Zully and the team at RSA are doing in the state and local space, check out statescoop.com. Again, I'm Jake Williams with Zully Ramzan from RSA, the CTO of RSA. Thanks for watching.